Oh boy, I'm totally confused and I haven't even started the video just yet. I have a hard time getting through the intro because the thing is, this video, even though I have no idea how long it will be, definitely will be very long because there is a lot to cover, and that's why I will do it the casual way. I could mix up some things, I could mess up some stats or something like that, but that's not the important part because here's the thing. I wanted to do a video like this for already like the past 2 years, and I didn't get to it. What I did 3 years ago was like a top phones of the year where I had different categories like best display, best speaker, and such things where I had a top 5 or something like that. But what I wanted to do this time a little bit different is not what you actually asked for, because some people have asked, could you make a top 5 video or your most favorite phones of the year? But since I've reviewed so many phones this year, I just always can't remember them. And that's why I said, how could I cover all of those? So I made a list of all the phones that I've reviewed this year, which seems to be in total 46. So what I'm going to do here is cover all 46 phones in chronological order, the way I got them. Not maybe always the way I reviewed them in the order, but it should be pretty much the same. So I will maybe post it here and you can maybe see it, or maybe in the description or something like that, because I wanted to actually permanently have it here, but I think that would be a little bit too distracting for you to actually watch it. But in case you want to know something about a certain phone, you can see the list and kind of then guess where it should be, because I'm not gonna make time codes for all of this. So like I said, since some of the phones have been reviewed like 10, 11 months ago already, don't quote me on any specs, and it's actually not just interesting for me to see how long this video will be, but how well I can actually still even remember some phones. So some I will maybe cover real quickly, some a little bit longer, just the way I think it's necessary. Okay, so first phone that I got in 2018 was the Xiaomi Redmi 5 Plus, and I have to say this was a great start into the mid-range segment for 2018, because the Redmi 5 Plus, if I'm not getting that wrong, had a Snapdragon 630, and it had a very nice display for its price, because it was pretty much dirt cheap by now. It should be like a little over 100, if at all, and good display, good speaker, good performance, great battery life as usually, camera was fine, so it was pretty much a total package, and everyone who bought it, I think, should be still fine. Now, the reason why I didn't recommend it as much a little bit later on was just because of the Redmi Note 5, which I will get into later on. But if you bought the Redmi 5 Plus or the Redmi Note 5, I don't think you should upgrade anytime soon. You definitely don't need the 6 series, because that one I actually skipped as well because the differences were minor. But next phone, Honor 7X. Actually, before I got it, I didn't have high hopes on it, and when I got it, I actually found it really good. And then I remembered, wait, the Honor 6 last year actually wasn't that bad either. It was actually also surprisingly good, because for the value it's still good. I think still that those phones are a little bit overstated, especially in the US with their amazing budget value. But I guess that's also because of the fact that in the US you don't really have many good mid-range or budget phones, which we definitely have in Europe, or especially if you import, and then just with Xiaomi and some other brands, the market is so saturated and it's very hard to stand out. But on its own, a really nice phone. Now, next phone was the Honor View 10. Well, I have to say that one was better than I expected as well, because it was a pretty much complete package for its price. This is the thing, I don't remember it all that well anymore, but it performed good. The display, well, again, it had dimming, but if that wouldn't have been the case, or not an issue for me, it would have been a pretty nice package for a really good price. A little bit of a bigger device than I usually like, but I mean, that is still holding up quite good, I would say. Next phone, Xiaomi Redmi 5. That one was the smaller version of the 5 Plus, I think like 5.5 inches or 5 inches, depending on if it still had actually an elongated display that I can't remember. But I liked it quite a lot, but it just wasn't quite on the level, because it only had, I think, the version that I reviewed, 2 gigabytes of RAM, which for multitasking is just not good enough anymore. Or maybe it was even free and that wasn't good enough anymore. Because what I would say, 4 gigs. If you have 4 gigs of RAM on your phone, you are totally solid even for the next 1 or 2 years. I mean, if you have 6, I think that's the sweet spot at the moment, because 6 is noticeably better than 4. But anything above 6 you won't really notice anymore. So all those 8 gig and sometimes by now even 10 gigabyte phones, they are not really worth just getting because of that. But I mean, anything below 4 gigabytes you will need a lot of reloading of apps and so on. So I'm not the biggest fan, but overall hardware was good, and for what it was also good, which could be said for the next one as well, the iPhone 10. That was the very first iPhone that I reviewed. I mean, reactions from my viewers were a little bit mixed, because some said that I don't really know what I'm talking about, which I obviously didn't, because I never reviewed one. I mean, I use iPads for a long time already, but on a phone it's still a different experience, and I didn't have by now, or I mean by back then, all the apps that I still need. So with the XS I knew a little bit more and I got the apps that I needed, so the experience was a little bit better. But still, back then the iPhone XS, or the 10 then, didn't really perform all that amazing, and there was a lot of stuff which had to do a lot with the iOS version that it was running back there. But the camera impressed me a lot, especially the video camera was superb. Normal pictures as well. I'm not quite so sure about the selfie cam anymore, but I'm super impressed about the selfie cam of the XS, so I'm not quite so sure about that. But speaker was good, hardware felt great, so it was an overall great phone, but yeah, I mean, obviously overpriced. Samsung Galaxy A8, also quite a good phone. That's actually a phone that I recommended quite often for people that I know who want the Samsung phone, just because they are so used to the UI, but just don't want to break the bank. And sometimes I just prefer that over something like an S8 or an S7 or something like that, because it just had noticeably better battery life. I mean, yes, display isn't as good as on an S8, the camera isn't as good, and maybe the performance, but therefore it just had more battery life, which is a more important thing for many people to get easily through the day if they do what they do, because performance, especially for normal people, isn't that much of a thing. And even the camera performance, they don't really care, because they are not pixel people or anything like that. So A8, pretty nice phone. Then we have the HTC U11 Plus. And that one did not actually impress me so much, because the HTC U11 did. It had some issues, but the 11 Plus once again had this quite dim, odd screen. Their LCD technique, I think it was the LCD 5 back then, was odd, but I mean, performance was good. The display was, like I said, the actual little bit hold down. The speakers were fine. Battery life was quite actually good, because I think that's something from what I remember that HTC had quite good. The camera was solid. I liked their UI. It felt good, a little bit bigger than it would have needed to be. But overall, still a good phone. And this phone by now, especially here in Germany, is so often on sale, and you got it pretty much so cheap. More often the U11 than the U11 Plus, but still. Okay, then Sony Xperia XA2. To be honest, I don't really remember much of that, just as with the Ultra. I know that I wasn't quite impressed with the overall hardware, not just because of the design, but it felt not quite as solid as premium. Displays were fine, speakers usually a little bit on the disappointing side from Sony. Performance was, for what they are, quite good. I think the XA2 maybe not quite so much, but yeah. Battery life was, as far as I remember, good, and the camera back then on those devices not quite as good yet. Okay, then Nokia 6.1, or the Nokia 6 2018 like I called it. I used the Chinese version for that. I have to say it was a big step up from the 6 that I didn't like at all. I complained about that much, and I actually went so far out and said you shouldn't buy it, and not just that you maybe, yeah, should think otherwise. But yeah, it got better. It still felt a little bit hard and edgy, but performance got better. They used a better chip finally this time. The camera was still not quite as good, but it got better, especially with the Google Camera app, or the Pixel Cam app, the modded one. Battery life was solid, and everything else was solid. Price-wise, value was good. Okay, Samsung Galaxy S9. That actually, believe it or not just the Plus version, actually the S9 version would actually maybe be by now my daily driver, and would have been my favorite favorite phone of the year if it would have had better battery life. Because I had the Exynos version, and for some reason all Exynos phones that I've used, like I do use every other phone, has, I wouldn't say maybe terrible battery life, but pretty bad battery life. So I would, in most cases, actually make it through the day, but those were moderate, normal days when I'm not reviewing a phone. When I'm reviewing a phone, I use it way more than I personally do, because personally, whenever I have my daily driver, which still is the OnePlus 5T by the way, when I use that, I don't really use phones that much anymore, because, yeah, I actually noticed that I use phones way more often just for reviewing purposes. So I would make it through the day, but if I would, for example, think if I would have a trip to somewhere, like for example when I was in the US, when I was driving a lot with GPS, or when I went to IFA and needed GPS a lot and some trackings and some photos and so on, then I don't think the battery would have lasted, especially since the standby drain on mobile data was pretty terrible. Then Xiaomi Redmi Note 5, I mentioned that already. That one, if I don't get it wrong, had a Snapdragon 636. And it performed really good. It was a little bit on the more slippery side, but most people use cases anyways. Display was fine, speaker was fine. And when I say fine, actually for its price, really good. Battery life was top. Software, yeah, fine. by now I like MIUI a little bit more now that it's running MIUI 10. 9 still had some issues. They fixed some of them just recently with 10 actually. Camera was fine. So for the price back then of around like 150 euros or so, pretty quickly. When I reviewed it was like a little over 200 by now. This was such a good phone, and especially in the first half of the year, one of my most recommended phones out there, because it was pretty much a total package. I mean, some people still disagree with that, but I mean, I like it still a lot. LGV30. Yeah. I think I reviewed it quite late in the game. For some reason, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, it must have been because that phone was released actually in 2017, if I don't get that wrong. But it was actually one of my, I would say, most surprising phones, or one of the kind of most impressive phones that I did not expect, because the display I really liked. I liked the in-hand feel. It was a little bit bigger than I would have liked it to. The speaker was fine finally. The performance was always very good. Battery life was better, way better than I expected. Camera, not quite my thing, but yeah, and the software. But overall as a package, especially when the price went down, I mean, really good phone, especially if you are into manual photography, video, and sound, best headphone jack and all that kind of stuff. Still a very, very good phone. Sony Xperia XZ2, that would have pretty much most probably already been one of the best phones of the first half of 2018, and I would actually say, from what I remember, the way I feel, the way I perceived it by now, I think that would have been the best performing phone of 2018. I'm not quite sure about how it performs now, because what I've noticed, what I've said in some videos, that I think that all the Snapdragon 845 phones with Oreo, no, not from Oreo, with Oreo, with Pi, felt like they got a little bit slower or got a few more micro stutters, maybe not quite as optimized or something like that, but the Xperia XZ2 was performing brilliantly. Battery life was very, very good and noticeably better than some of the other ones at that point in time. Display, I mean, no, it was, I would say, yeah, I'm pretty confident saying that was the best LCD display that I've seen in the year. Speaker was not quite my thing just yet. The camera, once actually fully delivered. The most natural colors of 2018. I'm not quite sure. Actually, even the XZ3 felt a little bit less natural. So, great camera, video great, software, I mean, not quite yet, but with Android Pie got better, even though I haven't reviewed it, but I know it from the XZ3, so actually still a super nice phone. The price has dropped, so I liked it quite a lot. I mean, yeah, ergonomics weren't quite that good because button placement was wrong, fingerprint reader was quite low. If they would have actually figured that out and made the phone a little bit lighter, that would have been pretty much one of the best phones out of the... Okay, maybe a little bit of a better speaker, but I mean, overall... I mean, the ergonomics, and this is something, I mean, if you have your phone in your hand the whole day, and this is something that I've just, for example, noticed with the Pixel XL, the free, if you have bad ergonomics, for some reason, I don't like to use that phone a lot. Okay, XZ2 Compact, well, all that I just said, just in a smaller package, and since it is pretty much the only phone that is at this size, man, I mean, the closest thing would have been right now the Pixel 3, the normal one. But it's in its own league. Pretty much the best compact phone. And in terms of in and feel, it got better than the XZ1 compact or whatever was before that. So yeah, nice. Nokia 7 Plus. Well, the issue is that I had back then that the performance wasn't quite there yet, which is what I noticed also on the 7.1. But I've heard from people that for some reason Nokia doesn't seem to perform that well, especially at the beginning. And for example, the multitasking stutter that I've noticed, the lag, from what I've heard, was fixed like 3 months later. I mean, it's just too late. I mean, everyone is praising that it uses Android One like some other phones, but I think the hype is too big, because for the reason why I don't like Android One so much, limited. I mean, you have pretty much no options out of at all. And even though you get the good updates, you get a little bit of a bloat and so on, for some reason Nokia doesn't optimize Android One as well. And I've noticed this on some other Android One phones as well. So for some reason, people seem to kinda mix up what Google does with their Pixel UI or whatever you want to call it at Android One. Because Pixel's UI runs bloody smooth, bloody fast. Android One is not quite the same. So just because it's looking like it, it doesn't perform like it. Okay, Xiaomi Mi Mix 2S, that might have been the most solid phone of the first half of the year because it felt great. I mean, if they would have made the kind of curved back like they did on the Mi 8, this would have been my daily driver for a long time actually, because the display was so good, but it was not quite on the AMOLED level that I would have wanted to. But that wasn't the issue. It was mostly the in and feel, but it felt so good. Great design. Speaker was actually felt a little bit weaker than the previous version, but it was still a very good dual speaker system. Performance was bloody good. That was pretty much on XZ2 level. So great. Battery life was top. Software was good. And the camera, for me, a little bit overrated, but more than I would have ever needed, even though maybe, yeah, there are better ones out there for sure. But for the price, especially what you can get it now, still a steal. And many people seem to prefer it over the Mix 3 just because it doesn't have the slider and it's not unnecessary heavy and clunky and bulky and can break easier. So that's that. Okay, next phone would be the Huawei P20 Pro. Oh man, the P20 series. That was actually the point in time when I made a little bit after the video. So did I do it before? I think afterwards. When I made my video, I will never review a Huawei phone anymore. And yeah, by now I've heard it so many times that people say, you said you wouldn't review it anymore, or Huawei, and I still do it. I've explained it. People change. I mean, why? That's the one thing that I think is a little bit hypocritical. People act like I'm now not reliable anymore if they can't trust me, if something shading is going on, because I said I won't review them and now I do them again. Someone actually told me that I got a good bonus from a sponsor, that I got a good amount of money from the brand to actually cover them again. Anyone who knows my relationship with Huawei's press agency here in Germany knows that I would never get money from them. And I mean, if you aren't as stupid as that guy who made that comment, you would have seen that I get all my Huawei phones not from Huawei, not from the press agency, but straight from Cyberport, like I do with pretty much all my phones. So, yeah. So yeah, I reviewed them because, I mean, have you ever said something and then did it anyways? I think, yeah, everyone changes his opinion at some point in time. No one says he won't do anything anymore ever again and then maybe does it. So, yeah. But the phone, I still don't think it was all that great of a phone. I mean, yeah, camera, great. Display was good, but nothing special. I mean, really good for a flagship, but it was a good flagship level phone, nothing more. I mean, display. The in-hand feel, it was a little bit more on the clunky side. I mean, yeah, great big battery and so on, but it felt a little bit uninspired in terms of design. The notch was an issue for me. Speaker was very good. Battery life was top-notch. Performance, yeah, the dimming and all, that's just a deal breaker for me. But, I mean, it was still quite expensive, and, I mean, by now it's better. And if it would have been for the dimming, it would have at least had a higher perceived rating in my head. I mean, what I gave it as a rating is still the one that I would have given it, despite with or without the dimming. People can't seem to kind of be able to distinguish what I say and what I think, or what I say subjectively and objectively. But objectively, I gave it the rating that it deserved. Subjectively, I hate it just because of the dimming. That's just a deal breaker for me. But I was fair to it. It was a very good phone, but it just, for example, in comparison to the Note, to the S9 and something like that, did nothing groundbreakingly better. And then the P20, watered down P20 Pro, actually heavier watered down than what the Mate 20 is now compared to the Mate 20 Pro. Then the P20 Lite, that one I actually give an extra award. Worst phone that I've reviewed in 2018. I can't think of anything that I've had a worse experience, and especially with the comments. People bashed me so hard that I have no idea that it's running super smooth, that it's the best phone out there. Even some people actually said I have a P20 Lite, it's better than an XE3 or it's better than a Note 9. And I mean, yeah, it's nice sometimes to maybe delusional, but this phone objectively was not good, and at the point where I reviewed it was overpriced. So yeah, shittest phone of the year, at least from what I've reviewed. There are shittier phones out there from China, something like for $30 or so, but I can't really think of anything that I've reviewed that was worse. Maybe I will see through the list if something happens. Moto G6, got a little bit too praised in my opinion, because people said it's the best mid-ranger, the best bang for your buck. It was really good, but I think all of those praising reviews it got from the US side, where you just don't have the alternatives. I've said this already so many times. Unfortunately, in the US, if you don't import, you don't really get many good mid-ranges. You either have a contract and then you have a flagship, or you just don't really get something really good. And the Moto G6 is where it falls exactly into that space, because it is a really good phone, and in the US maybe great, but for example in Europe, or if you can import phones, there are just better solutions out there. But if I would have to recommend someone something here, for example, also back then especially, in that price segment, if it doesn't want to import, that would have been still very high on top of the list. Xiaomi Black Shark, a little bit of an underrated phone, I would actually have to say, because it had a beautiful display, actually better than the Mi Mix 2S. It was a little bit on the bigger side, but it had front-facing speakers, dual speakers, or maybe it was a dual speaker system, maybe not front-facing, but doesn't matter. Killer performance, yeah, maybe throttled, yeah, not that I care. Battery life was fantastic, the camera was very good, so this was, for its current price, what I would say, still a great phone. I mean, I'm not quite so sure about the new Black Shark, which actually feels a little bit better for me, but I just didn't get the time to review that as well. But the Black Shark I liked a lot. I mean, it was a really nice phone. I mean, it has nothing really to do with gaming, besides kind of the outside looks, but yeah. Okay, then the Moto G6 Plus. A noticeably better phone than the G6. That one I could recommend easier, because it was quite a noticeable, significant step up. Better processor, the display I think was actually not better. I think the 6 had a nicer display, but I can't really remember so much. But everything else was just a little bit better and worth the extra money. Then Xiaomi Mi 6X or the A2. That one is, for me, pretty much on the same level as a Note 5, Xiaomi Redmi Note 5. If you want something that feels thinner, lighter, that has the better front-facing camera. I think the cameras were a little bit better, but therefore had less battery life. So I actually recommended that phone to many people, saying if you don't need the great battery life of the Note, get the Mi A2, because it felt just noticeably thinner, smaller, and overall it was performing absolutely great. Super nice display and speaker and everything else. So this was also absolutely worth what it got in terms of reviews, positive aspects, and so many people seem to like it, and I absolutely get why. Okay, now the Asus Zenfone 5. Yeah, that one was one of my worst accepted reviews for a long time. It was, after a long time, a review of an Asus phone, and boy do I regret it in some way, because I mean, the phone wasn't bad. It had a nice display, but I think the calibration was just off. It also felt a little bit more unwieldy just because of the overall shape, like it could have been. But the display was still nice. Many people wouldn't care, but the calibration was just a little bit off. Speaker was really good. Performance was actually also not that bad. Battery life wasn't all that great. Cameras were fine, and the software was a complete Samsung UI ripoff. But this phone, for its price back then, just didn't do it for me. It overall just wasn't quite. The notch was pretty ugly, and it had the issue when I changed the DPI. And sorry for the chair squeaking a bit, but nah, that phone just didn't do it for me, and so many Asus fanboys bashed me so hard, and everyone wanted me to review the Zenfone 5Z, which would have been the flagship. But I mean, what the 5 got me, the 5Z wouldn't have improved, because performance was not the issue, and all those little things, because the 5Z pretty much just had a better SoC. Other than that, it didn't really change much. The camera wasn't improved or anything else like that. So I wouldn't have liked that one much more either, so it wouldn't have been a change. Okay, then the OnePlus 6. I said this in my 6T review. I wasn't fully impressed by that phone, because it had a few things. I mean, it was actually not performing as good as some other Snapdragon 845 phones at that time. And people said it's the fastest phone out there, and yeah, it was pretty much maybe the fastest phone out there, but it wasn't the most consistent, smooth performing one. So I saw a little bit more of micro stutters and so on. Really tiny ones, but I've noticed these, and people always tell me that how I can see micro stutters when everything else is super. I have sensitive eyes, I see this, and if it's just a little bit, I'm gonna mention it, and maybe some people just overstate what I'm saying or just read too much into it. But if I have 10 phones that perform within like 5%, I'm gonna mention these, and it maybe doesn't matter in real life, which is something that I always say, but for me it's noticeable, and in some cases even those 5% can be significant enough, because if I can get pretty much the same phone without those stutters, those rare ones, but still, there's the option. But otherwise, felt great. The midnight black, by now I have to say, feels amazing, but it's not quite as consistently grippy. But still, button layout, yeah, not perfect. But display is very nice. Wasn't really improvement over the 5T though. Then the speaker that was my issue. The speaker got worse, and people have told me that it got an update where it actually got on par with the 6T right now. And I said the 6T now has a really good speaker, actually better than the 5T, but the 6 hadn't. If they really, which is something that I actually can't believe, tweaked it so much with software updates that it got that good, then a lot of my perceived, what I have in my mind, my memories actually then would have been better, because that was my main big issue, because my 5T I use so for YouTube videos, and it has the capability to go so loud where I most often pretty much never need more than like 80-90% volume, where I use pretty much all other phones at 100% for the speaker. That was one of my big downside. Performance and battery life was very good, even though software, oh yeah, I mean everyone should switch to something like that. And then the camera was solid, but nothing crazy special, especially flagships were noticeably better. So I wasn't quite fully feeling that phone, especially coming from a 5T. The differences weren't that big, and the fingerprint reader for me didn't work quite as reliable anymore. So great phone, but not quite what I wanted. BQ Aquaris X2 and the X2 Pro, pretty much the same phone with the main big difference of a different chip. The one has the 636 and the one has the 660, the Pro. And the glass back compared to a polycarbonate back. Pretty similar thing, like I said, with the Nokia 7 Plus. Not quite there, because for some reason, I don't know why, BQ doesn't make flagship phones. They make premium mid-ranges, like for example the X2 Pro. But I mean, they performed really good, but I think that a 660 could have performed even a little bit better. The speakers were nice, the display was actually really good. This time they improved the kind of odd red tint that the X1 had. The battery life was solid, but also could have been better in my opinion on a phone with that chip, with that battery size and so on. Software, I mean, for me, a little bit old, boring. Android, limited. And then a pretty nice camera. So it was lacking a little bit, especially for its price war, what it had back then, compared to the really good ones in terms of value, like some Xiaomi phones or some other phones that you just can't get. It was lacking a little bit. So either, what I've said in my review, should have gone a little bit more high-end, and not raise the price too much, and played with something like a OnePlus 6 on par, because with the smaller size it would have actually had a chance against that phone in terms of overall specs and so. Or they should have maybe just ditched one of the two versions and made a little bit more of a coherent, more mature premium mid-range. But still, otherwise a nice phone, but quite a little bit something that it was missing. Xiaomi Mi 8. Actually, of the flagships, especially from what I know from the Mi 6 that I love still so much, this is maybe, yeah, the most disappointing flagship for me. Because maybe I had too high expectations, because, I mean, it got bigger. That's something that I already didn't like so much, but it still felt amazing in the hand. The speaker was just bottom firing. It wasn't the best one out there. The display had a huge, awful notch. It didn't show me any notifications, which was pretty much a deal breaker. Maybe they will fix that, or maybe they did. I'm not quite so sure. But that was a big thing, because if I can't see my notifications, I mean, it's so odd. I mean, Android is all about great notifications. And then, for example, this is actually what I would like to know, why it sometimes turns off and goes on again. So maybe power somewhere, I don't know. Camera was really good. I've actually shot all my shots in New York with that. I was pretty impressed, because all shots were very solid overall. Very good camera. And by now, with the newer update, with the software that it should get, or maybe got already, I don't know, since I don't have it anymore, should be on a Mi Mix 3 level, which would be then really, really good. Battery life was solid, even though not quite as much as I expected, but I used it mostly in the US. Performance wasn't quite there yet back then. Some issues were there. It wasn't just performing nearly as good as some other Snapdragon 845 phones. That by now could have also been fixed, I can say. Then the Mi 8 SE, which was actually a very interesting phone for me, because it was close in terms of size to a Mi 6, actually a little bit still bigger than a Mi 6. But if they would have had the curved back, and the Snapdragon 710 would have run on the level that it should be, because that was pretty much the same thing. The Mi 8 and the Mi 8 SE back then, at least when I had them, didn't run as good as they could have been. So maybe they fixed that, optimized it by now, and then it would be even better. But many people also told me that the price difference isn't just big enough not to just go for the Mi 8, which kind of is legit, and the rain is starting to get a little bit stronger. So I like that phone. Camera, I mean, some things just weren't as good as like if they could have been, like the speaker and so on, but overall still a very nice phone. Then I would say that's the underdog, surprising flagship of the year. No, not flagship actually, budget phone of the year, the Pocophone F1. I mean, it got a lot of flack from some people and it got a lot of love from some people. I can only give it love because it had a super nice, especially for this price, super nice display. It was totally fine. It wasn't the best one out there, but still, I mean, the issues with the light bleed and so on, my unit didn't have that. It felt really good. The plastic was not an issue at all. And I mean, yes, it was lacking some things like NFC and so, but if you want just a phone that performs absolutely top, had amazing battery life, a solid UI, and then for this price, actually surprisingly good camera, this was the phone to get. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. This phone, what it got in terms of praise, absolutely deserved it. And it also deserved a little bit of the flag for the display issues that a lot of people seem to have. But for this price, I mean, a colleague of mine bought it. Actually, he already ordered it and then asked what he should get. And I said in the Pocophone, and he said, yeah, that's what I got anyways. And he got it for his wife, and she's super happy with it. She's actually super amazed by the display. I'm not quite sure what she was coming from, but he said she was super impressed actually with the brightness also of the display. So it wasn't the brightest one out there, but yeah, it's the case he didn't have a bright display. Okay, and then switching from the most surprising budget flagship to the phone of the year pretty much, but not quite for me, the Samsung Galaxy Note 9. It's the total package. Display, pretty much the best out there, rivaling the XZ3. The build quality is top notch. Design, for me, it's just a little bit too big. If they would have released something smaller, and then people told me the S9 and S9 Plus, yep, if not for the battery life, the worst one. That would have been it, sure, but speaker was great, performance was finally absolutely buttery smooth, top notch, no lag, no nothing, at least in the time that I had it. Battery life was, I mean, they needed quite a big battery to get a battery life that some others get with like 500, 600, 700 milliamp hours less, the external version at least. But the battery life was very good. I got like 5.5 hours, which is what I got on quite a lot of flagships in that time frame. So even though it needed a bigger battery life was good. Now, I always liked Samsung software. I mean, overly bloated, but yeah, it does the job really good. And the camera was top. I mean, front-facing focus, great night capabilities, even though it didn't even have a night mode yet. Overall, great main cam, especially if you use it on auto. Great video cam, one of the best ones out there. So this was pretty much the total package. Yeah, a little bit expensive at first, and for me a little bit too big, but the price and by now is like down to $650, and by now it's not just in terms of value actually good, but it's the best thing that you could buy, I would actually say. Honor Play, nice phone for the price, especially if you get it on a little bit of a sale. Solid display, solid speaker, better performance that I've seen on many others with the Kirin 970. Battery life was obviously, like pretty much always on a Huawei phone, very good. The camera was not quite as impressive, but overall a very nice, a little bit below flagship tier phone. A nice mid-range. LG G7 didn't quite take me away. I mean, the in-hand feel still had kind of similar issues like on the G6 that I didn't like so much. So, but yeah, that was fine. Fingerprint reader on the back, I don't like theirs because it's so slow. The display was overrated in my opinion. I mean, it was a super crazy bright display, but the calibration once again was a bit off. And if a phone has this kind of calibration, I just can't enjoy the display. And I tried to tweak it and so much, but I didn't get the colors to have kind of the same appearance like pretty much any other phone out there. So it was off, and off means that it's completely or visibly different compared to anything else out there, and maybe not compared to the best ones out there. Then the speaker was loud enough, but the boombox didn't do it for me. Didn't really care for much, but it was still a bottom firing speaker that didn't have the best sound quality, but it was pretty loud. Performance was top. Battery life was not quite as good as on the G6, for example, or on the V30 as far as I remember, but still good. Software, yeah, what it is. And camera, actually, even though I gave it 5 stars, one of the worst 5-star cameras, because I mean, if you use it with manual modes and all that, it's great, but in auto they don't quite impress so much. Then Umidigi Z2 Pro, yeah, nah, it wasn't a special phone. It was for what it was, which was okay, just overpriced with over 300 euros. That should have been a 180 phone or something like that. So not really much more to talk about that. Vivo Nex A, also one of the most overrated phones of the year, I would say. Because, I mean, the display was nice. That was actually one of the stronger parts, but it was quite big. The whole camera thing, didn't care for it, the slide out mechanism and so on. Then we had solid performance, battery life was very good, camera wasn't really that special, and just a deal breaker software. The software just didn't allow for anything on the Chinese version. So many limitations, so many annoyances. The software was pretty much the only big deal breaker, but it was a big deal breaker. Then we have the Sony Xperia XZ3. Love the display. I love the in-hand feel, the ergonomics. I mean, it's something that during the review period I can get used to and I can say, yes, it's fine. So, but over a longer period of time, I think it would be, after all, something that annoys me after all, because the buttons are too low, the fingerprint reader. And I said, yeah, you can get used to it, but I'm not quite sure if I would fully get used to it, just because it's so off complete to something else, compared to something else. But the speaker finally got really good now, what I was super happy, because they didn't get that right for a long time. And besides having the pretty much best display, which for me is pretty much my favorite display, maybe next to the Note 9. Battery life was not quite as good as anymore as on the XZ2, but still absolutely more than good enough, still quite good. Software got improved. The few things that I didn't like so much on their Oreo UI, they finally fixed with Pi, so I was happy with that. Camera once again was fast and great and everything else. And a little bit expensive when I tested it, it should be a little bit more reasonable by now. One of, I would say, the top 5 phones this year. Then Xiaomi Mi 8 Lite, a little bit of an unnecessary phone, because at that price you could already get the Mi 8 SE, which was after all a little bit better, or if you want maybe something, just something like the Redmi Note 5 or something. So it felt a little bit unnecessary. It was a solid phone, overall good, and price was okay, and everything was actually quite good, but I didn't think we needed a phone like this with so many similar ones from Xiaomi sides. And that's, like I said, for example, why I didn't even bother to review the Redmi 6 series, the Pro and whatever else. iPhone XS. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I learned a little bit more about the few annoyances that I couldn't get past by now, because back then I had still automatic brightness. I know how to fix that now. So that was better experience. So the display didn't fully blow me away, but it was a great display, easily 5 stars after all still. But Note 9 seems a little bit more impressive to me, but that one was fully fixed, so I was fully pleased with that. The in-hand feel was great. Speaker, I actually felt it was better on my 10, so not quite sure why. Maybe memory, maybe just something else, but it felt to me like the 10 had a better speaker than the 10, but the 10S has still a very good speaker. Performance, very good, but not, in my opinion, not on an 845 level or on a Kirin 980 level, because there is still, and I maybe can blame most of the third-party apps to that, but I mean, I don't care if I use a phone and apps just stutter or just don't run super smooth. I don't care if it's the system, if it's the phone, or if it's the app itself. Doesn't matter for me. But once again, battery life, that was actually way better than I expected, and a camera. Easy top 5, if not maybe even top 3 camera, because amazing selfies, amazing video, amazing normal pics. I mean, low light qualities were very off, especially on video also, where it got so grainy and noisy and so on. But I like the simplicity and the ease of use of that cam. Yeah, great. Then Nokia 7.1, I said it, overrated, and what did I say, overpriced or something like that. I mean, in the US, once again, it might be a very good phone for this price because of the lack of competition. But on a global scale, with import phones in the picture, yeah. Once again, also Android 1 didn't perform as it should, battery life wasn't as it should have been. Camera was quite good, but it could have been, I mean, for what it should have been on the price level, it should have been even better to be the phone that many made it look like it was, but it wasn't. Okay, Xiaomi Mix 3. Now, I've wished from the Mix 1 to the Mix 2 to the Mi Mix 2S, I wished for them to curve the back just like they did on the Mi 8, and they finally did it. But obviously we all know that it's a slider phone, and if they would have just pretty much did what they did on the Mi 2S, so kept the camera at the bottom and released it a non-slider, this would have been it. I mean, felt amazing. The display was super nice. The speaker, if they would have kept maybe a dual speaker system, because the speaker was not quite as good anymore, so it was a little bit of a disappointment. Still good enough, it would have been fine, but that was the thing. Performance, absolutely top. Software got better, they got rid of a few annoyances, and a really, really good, super, super close. In some cases, maybe I could give it a 5-star rating, but camera was also very good. It got better, but I still think there are some minor differences, advantages over some real flagship cameras, but that could have been it, because price will drop pretty quickly on this phone, and it's a great phone. But the whole slider mechanism that makes the phone thicker, heavier, bulkier, with a smaller battery, even though the battery life was absolutely top in my experience, it could have been it if they just would have maybe not made it a slider. That's just me. Okay, then the return of the Huawei phone reviews. Mate 20, I have to say, this is actually my most favorite, because the Mate 20 Lite I didn't review because it was shit for the price. It's Snapdragon, the Kirin 710, nah. And overall, I knew I wouldn't like that phone, so I skipped it on purpose. I mean, I have not tried the Mate 20X, but just because it's a bigger Mate 20, Mate 20 Pro, something in between, and it's just too big for me. It just didn't really bother me so much. I know a lot of people are super hyped on it because the huge battery, huge display and all that, and I think if you liked the Mate 20 and the Mate 20 Pro, and if you want a bigger phone, this will be it. But then again, Mate 20, nice, very pretty, pretty much bezel-less design, only the teardrop notch that I liked quite a lot. I mean, compared to some other solutions, obviously. It was a little bit wider than I wanted to. I actually wish for maybe like a 6.3 inch display or 6.2, because otherwise the shape was great. The display was very nice. It pretty much almost didn't dim. Then a speaker that was a little bit disappointing. Even though it was a dual speaker system, it was a little bit weak one, so it could have been louder, it could have sounded richer. Performance, totally killer, like top 5 level. Superb. Battery life was very good, great actually. Software, yeah. And the camera, that was very, very close to Mate 20 Pro. Very, very close. So if you want to save some money and want a bigger display after all, you could go for that phone, absolutely. Now, Mate 20 Pro, oh yeah, I know, I don't know when it happened, but I called this what it is again, because the Mate 20 I called back when I reviewed still this phone. And I wanted to call the Pro this phone Pro, and I said, nah, it's a little bit silly, let's just forget, let's call it what it is again, let's get over the whole Huawei thing. And I called it Mate 20 Pro, and it worked out good for like a week or two, and then it seems to have been picked up by the Huawei fanboy crowd, and those tell me again that I messed up the fingerprint reader, that I didn't hit it properly. But I mean, this is something that I don't get why people think. If I show something on video and I try to demonstrate it, and I maybe don't always get the fingerprint reader right, that is a momentary issue. That is something that just happened, and I don't, since I have to look at the monitor to see myself also, I maybe don't hit it right. But I'm talking from experience. I've used this phone for 2 weeks, and the fingerprint reader, in my opinion, was bad. It was slow, it was non-reactive, it wasn't super reliable. That's why it wasn't good. Not because I by purpose didn't hit it right. So I don't get that. But otherwise, a very nice display. And when I say very nice, on a flagship level, because it was about on an S8 level. It still had more distortion on the sides. There was the glue gate, the kind of green something shit like that, and issue that I didn't have in my unit. It was a little bit later on. I guess they fixed that by now. And speaker that was fully fine with me. I mean, I dual speaker system through the USB port, but I mean, it sounded good. Totally sounded good. Absolutely happy with that. Not on an S9 level or on a Note 9 level, but still. Battery life was absolutely top. Dimming software and all that. I mean, it had, again, the normal heavy dimming. Not like the Mate 20 for some reason, which had a way more subtle dimming. That one had the big dimming that pissed me off again. And yeah, the best camera and so on. I mean, yeah, the camera was very good, but if I compare it side by side to the Mate 20, it wasn't. Actually, sometimes even better. Sometimes it was worse. I mean, that's obviously depending on some pixels and here and there, but like I said, it's a great flagship camera, but I don't see doing something drastically better than so many other phones out there. So I don't get why people call it the best camera. I mean, if the differences are so tiny, and especially it doesn't have a great front-facing camera, the video camera isn't good, how can you say it's the best camera? If I'm talking about the best camera, and just say this phone has the best camera, then in my opinion the front-facing cam, the video capabilities are included as well. Otherwise you have to say it's the best photo camera for the main cam. Okay, then we had the OnePlus 6T. I guess if I look at the list and everything else, this is the only phone that I would have bought myself personally if I wouldn't have one, if I would have needed one. Because, I mean, it fixed some of the issues that I had with the 6. Performance got a little bit better, but by now on the 6 I guess it's on the same level. But fingerprint reader, I actually liked the one on the front. It worked really good for me, and still there is this top-notch face unlock, even though maybe not super secure. It felt absolutely great. Buttons, not quite my thing, but that's something that I can pass through. The speaker, like I said, got better. The display felt a little bit better in my opinion, but maybe perceived thing. Then battery life was top. Especially if you watch videos. The software by far the best once again, and the camera improved a little bit, especially on the front-facing segment, which is not so much that bothers me, but overall, for the price, that is in my range, because everything over 600 euros is just something that I personally don't think I need. I wouldn't pay more than $600 for a phone just because it's not necessary. I can get something that works for me just as good, that is noticeably cheaper, like some Xiaomi phones or something else. So of all the phones that came out in 2016, this is the only one that I would have bought. I mean, the Note 9 for me, for example, fell out because of the size. The XZ2 ergonomics a little bit and weight. The LG G7 just didn't quite do it for me. V30 I liked a lot, but that was already like kind of last generation. The HTC I didn't review, for example, the 12 Plus, because I heard the display was a little bit disappointing again. It was a little bit clunky, so that's why also. And what else is there left? I mean, then I reviewed, for example, which brings me to my second last, if that's the correct term, the Honor Magic 2. Really nice phone, but I would prefer the Mix 3. I mean, it had the dimming once again, but the sliding mechanism was better. The camera was a little, actually on par. Then the battery life was tad little better, software definitely not better, and the performance was top notch. So very good from what it is, but once again a slider, so not something that's on my radar. And then the last one that I actually haven't reviewed yet, the Pixel 3 XL. But as a spoiler, as a teaser, I said that on Twitter already, it was the worst first impressions that I've had, or my first few minutes or hours with a phone that I have had in years. And I have to just say, I simply... Oh no, the phone scratched up. This is too expensive for me to pay the bill. I don't think I'm gonna use this much more, because this phone is so expensive and it's loaner. No, it actually seems fine. Okay, so my issues with this phone. Ergonomics are just brutal shit. I mean, no manufacturer places the power button so high up on top and above the volume rocker. Fingerprint reader a little bit too high, but that's something that a normal user actually got used to, absolutely. And no curve on the back, so it doesn't feel narrow, so it feels a little bit bigger than some phones with the same size actually do. The display, super nice, but doesn't wow me, but very, very good flagship level display. Speaker is the best that I've heard in this year. I mean, it's even better than, maybe not quite in terms of quality, but in terms of sheer loudness, and still very good quality over the Note 9. I have not reviewed something like the Razr 2 phone and something like that. But performance is killer, battery life seems good. Software, for me, once again, too limited, and the camera, yeah, especially for pictures, this is it. And as also for the front-facing cam with the amazing bokeh effect, if you care about that, makes it the... I would say this might get, I haven't really checked the main pictures yet, but this might get 5 gold stars in some segment. Maybe the front-facing cam will get it. Not so much for video capabilities, those are not that great, but overall for its price, it's completely overpriced. And then the two issues for me with the software, there are things that I will get into in the review that just annoy me so much, along with the power button placement. So even when this was on Black Friday, 200 off, it was still too expensive. So Video's about 50 minutes long. Actually, yeah, I expected something around like that. So, I mean, that was pretty much a minute for every video with my intro included and now the outro. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed. My PC was quiet. My temps are actually like 10 degrees lower, but I don't really have the spike so much anymore, it seems. But I'm happy because this distraction of the fan is when it cost me an hour to actually plug everything out and again and all this. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Thumbs up maybe. Other than that, yeah. Let me actually know how you see this list. Did anything really stand out to you? Because if I would have to say okay, let's actually do this. Standout flagships. XZ3 and 2, these both. The 6T over the 6 obviously. The Note 9. And in that regard also already in my opinion the Pocophone. If I would go for the really good mid-ranges, the Xiaomi Redmi Note 5. Just as the 5 Plus. Then, okay, the Mi Mix 2S is also very high up on top. But for the mid-ranges, actually it wasn't that great of a year for mid-ranges. If I just look at the list from what I reviewed. I mean, G6 Plus was nice. The Nokia 7 Plus was nice. But I mean, the Nokia 7 Plus is one of the ones that I would recommend. Maybe one of the most easiest ones. Then the Redmi Note 5, obviously. But other than that, I don't think any mid-rangers really blown me away this year. So very good budget level phones, but nothing really stands out. They are all on a very, very same level by now. So should I do this? Okay, let's make this. The length doesn't matter anymore. Let's make the same that I did, but just right off my head. Last time I prepared it. Best display, best this and this and this. Okay, best design. Let me think. I would maybe actually See, I wanted to go for the Mi 8 because the inner feel was great in the buttons and all. But the notch. So best design I actually can't choose because I really like the Samsung S9, but also the layout again, the XZ2 and 3, but the layout again. So a layout is actually more important, and for some reason the phones that feel great sometimes don't have the great design. So one of the best ones in terms of coherent, well done design would have actually maybe even been the Mate 20, the normal one. Okay, best display, I'm gonna just say XZ3 and Note 9 maybe on par or slightly lower, but those two. Then I don't really care about the second, third place by now. If something really comes up into my mind, I will mention it, but otherwise we don't really have to. Best speaker, I would say from what I've reviewed, the Pixel 3 XL, then the Note 9. Black Shark was really good. Pocophone was really good. Those just come into my mind. Best headphone jack, obviously the V30. I didn't have the 40 and the G7. Best performance, I would say Mate 20 or Honor Magic for the keyring side. A little bit better than the Pro, just a little bit though. Other than that though, XZ2 and the Mi Mix 2S. Those were, from what I have in my mind, the best performing Snapdragon 845 phones. The 6T wasn't quite as polished back then yet when I had it, which is like a week ago. Okay, and maybe if I miss something that doesn't matter. So battery life of those here, I would say the Black Shark and the Pocophone had pretty much the best battery life of all those phones. So the XZ2 was pretty close, but a little bit below that, something like with the Moto Magic 2. And so I would say the Pocophone and the Black Magic had the Black Shark had that, from what I can see on the list right now. Mate 20 had very good one, and Pro, but not quite that. Okay, then best software, Oxygen, obviously. Best camera. Okay, I'm actually going to divide this into categories. Best front-facing for photos, I would say, if you get it right, if you wait for the focus, it was for me the Note 9. super close, more reliable though than the iPhone XS, and maybe on the same level. I didn't really fully check that yet, the Pixel. So these would be the strongest front-facing videos, photos for me. In terms of video, I think I would have to give it to the iPhone, because the iPhone, due to not having an autofocus, which had issues on the Note 9, that's why. Because the Note 9 had issues with the focus. So it was a little bit more consistent and better on the iPhone XS. But then the Note 9, and this one doesn't seem to be it. And other than that, I don't really see anything with an amazing front-facing camera anymore. Low light, for me, the Note 9, I mean, without any extra effects, it just works so good. Here, actually, an honorable mention on the bad side was the iPhone X and XS that had, especially the XS, had very bad low light qualities. Main camera, Note 9, I guess Pixel, even though I haven't really fully reviewed that yet, and the iPhone. Sony maybe also about on that level. Best video, hands down, iPhone XS, I would say. Just felt by far the best for me. Then the Note 9. Sony was already very close. You could maybe put an LG into the game, but only if it comes down to... Yeah, I don't know. Wait, let me quickly check that. Okay. What else? The display is usually the last part. So, okay, let's think about the top 5 phones, if I can get to that. And this is not the best phone. Let's say my 5 favorite phones. So you now got it after all. OnePlus 6T. Note 9 still has to be on that list. Pocophone F1 as an amazing budget phone. XZ3 still. Yeah, a little bit on the low end, maybe the Xiaomi Redmi Note 5, but that's that. Okay, under an hour, good, and I have to do the whole thing now in German. Oh no. But yeah, let me think what you think about this video. Let me think what you think about this video. Let me know what you think about this video. That was what I meant. Yep. Yeah. Okay, until next time. Bye. Let's quit this. Where is the mouse? No, I can't do this.